All right, real quick intro. I just wanted to say the beginning of this video is Gyroflow stabilized footage. So if you're wondering where the analysis is, I'm going to try to use YouTube chapters. So go somewhere past 3-ish minutes and you'll see where the analysis is if that's what you're looking for. All right, thanks. All right, so that was the stabilized Gyroflow footage. I'm going to show you what my Gyroflow settings are, but first I just want to say I'm no Joshua Bardwell or Chris Rosser. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes in this analysis. I barely know what I'm looking at, how to analyze this, and what I'm going to do. I did take a few days to really think about this and do my research, so I have a little bit more content for this video. I was just going to slap one together before I even knew anything, but at least I have a little bit of an idea now. But I'm going to be scatterbrained, and I don't have the confidence like they do. I am not an expert in these topics. I've been flying drones for 5 years, but I've never had this issue, and I've never had to tune one. So anyway, let's jump into the Gyroflow settings. This is well, let's start off with what the quad is. It's a GEPRC Mark4 LR8, which is an 8-inch quad, which is the biggest quad I've ever bought. And strapped to that, I have a Caddx Walnut, which is a pretty low-cost camera, I'd say. I can't really afford a GoPro right now, so I put what I was actually supposed to put it on my 4-inch, but that's besides the point. It's a Caddx Walnut. It has a gyro on board, and I did some tests with my line of sight flights, and by putting it on my hat. I have a special hat with a mount on it, and I mean, the quality of the video isn't perfect, but it works really good for stabilization, so I'm happy with what happened after I played with Gyroflow on my first flight ever. So that's pretty awesome. So, okay, I'm already recording my screen here. You can tell this is my sorry, nervous recording. This is my Gyroflow project here. This is my final settings that I ended up on. I have been using Gyroflow for a little while, and I, like everything, I do way too much research, but I don't want to use the default settings like most pilots do. I think it's too much. I think it's too heavy. So I played around a lot with my previous recordings on this camera, and then this one was my first real FPV flight with this camera. So my goal is to not stabilize too much. I'll just jump right into what my settings are. So if you look right here, the default smoothness is actually 50%. So I've taken that down to half. I don't want it ultra smooth, and I can tell when a pilot has their, like the default settings of Gyroflow or whatever GoPro does, it's just too smooth. And some freestyle pilots will actually explain that well, there's a hashtag out there, no stab. But anyways, some freestyle pilots will brag that they don't use any stabilization. Well, I want to go somewhere in between. I actually had to stabilize this footage because it's so bad, and we'll see why in a little bit. But yeah, so anyway, my smoothness is down from 50% to 25%. And then I played with dynamic zooming. I don't like dynamic zooming, but it's kind of like a necessary evil. But what I did do is I changed the zoom limit from, hopefully I'll zoom in on this for you in my video editing program. But anyways, the default zoom limit is 130%. So I played with, I don't want to lose all the resolution from the sensor. Although I did record in 4:3 so that I can have extra resolution for after when the stabilization crops in. And I'll show you that right here. You can see before I take off, it doesn't need to zoom at all. So it's just cropping 4:3 to 16:9. But if you go further into the flight, you can see that I'm not zoomed very hard. And because my settings are really conservative, all I'm doing is getting rid of this little jitter. It's hard to explain. That's the problem in the flight. But there's this like, I call it high frequency. According to the gyro, it's pretty damn low frequency. But the stabilization is, if you can see this in the video editing program, it's getting rid of that jitter, but just enough. I mean, you can see just a little bit in the final product when I'm watching it in high quality on my computer. But Gyroflow is amazing, man. I just wanted to show my settings. So I'm doing 25% smoothness and instead of 50%, and 110% zoom limit instead of 130. And I went back and forth between static zoom and dynamic zoom. I guess I like dynamic zoom better for this particular flight. And what's funny is it makes it look like all the pilots that I love. It does not look like this on my analog DVR when I'm flying. It doesn't look like this unstabilized. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you the unstabilized footage, and then we're going to analyze some black box logs and go into my theory of what I think is happening, because I hated how it flew. And it's pretty obvious to me now that I have a full setup what people are doing. If they're not good pilots or if their setup's not clean, Gyroflow fixes it all. All right, I'm going to start watching this video with you guys and just give some of my initial analysis. Let me turn this down first. So hopefully you can see this. There's some bad jitter in there. I mean, it's a wobble fest, basically. And I could see this in the analog DVR. Maybe I'll mix some of that in my video editing program, but I could feel this on the analog DVR. It wasn't just the walnut or how it was mounted or my 3D print or anything. This stuff is on both gyros. This stuff is, it's not flying good. And I thought I had bought a factory tuned bind and fly, where they had tuned it. Now, obviously, they didn't tune it with my battery and my camera, but it flew like this without the camera on it before I had mounted it, made a 3D custom mount. But yeah, it's wobbling bad. A couple times I thought I was going to crash. Now, this was a windy day, but the whole point for me buying this drone was to fly on windy days. We get a lot of windy days, so it was gusting 20 miles per hour this day. I don't know what it was constant, but it was, I checked the logs, it's gusting 20 miles per hour. My first flight, there's a nice little flip. My first flight, I was really nervous, and it was slightly windy, and it had this wobble. I only have analog DVR footage of that. That's already posted on my YouTube. The second flight was like butter. Now, I didn't have the Caddx Walnut mounted on there yet, but it was zero wind, and that might have been the difference. I have actually gone up to this quad now, and I can bend the arms. Let's pause this, and I'll show you a picture of what I'm talking about. That's enough flight footage. We've seen the wobble. We know what it looks like. So I'm going to show a picture of the quad here. So I took my hands from, and I can, the reason, see, I'm so scatterbrained. The reason why the LR10 and the Helion 10 from iFlight have a bar in between, because once you get these motors out this far, it almost doesn't matter how thick this carbon is right here. You're going to get some kind of oscillation, in my opinion. And I think that's why a lot of frames, even smaller frames, have that crossbar between the two motors, or I've seen ones that are in an entire box. But anyways, I can take this motor and arm and bend it towards this motor and arm like significantly. And then if I try to bend the whole thing by like, it's hard to show it without holding the drone, but if I take the whole thing and try to bend it like this, it's flexible. And I don't know, I've never held a big drone. I don't know how stiff they're supposed to be. Everyone loves 7 inches, and they seem to go straight up to 10s, and it seems like the 10s all have that crossbar on there. So I'm thinking that an 8-inch needs it also, just because of the, you know, the wingspan, wheel diameter, whatever the heck they call it officially. Also, I'm not too fond of this top plate. It seems a little thin. It looks thick in this picture, but there's another issue that I possibly ran into. Let me reset, and I'll show you that picture. All right, I'm kind of doing this all out of order, but I wanted to show you this picture of what I'm talking about, of one of my issues. So, wow, that's kind of low resolution. I don't know why that happened. Anyways, this is a TPU GoPro mount that I designed for this frame, and I was trying to illustrate a theory that I had to my friend. I drew some lines where the screws go down. Now, so I took the factory screws that were in countersunk holes out of the carbon top plate and printed this TPU mount, and then I used my own screws, which they're not countersunk, they're just button heads, so they're resting on a flat pocket inside. I did countersink them, but it's not a taper, it's a flat to flat. I don't know how to explain that. I forget all my engineering terms when I'm recording. Anyways, my concern was that this top plate right here was very rigidly mounted to these standoffs, which tied the whole front of this quad together. And what I've essentially done with this TPU mount is I've soft mounted the front third of this drone, because my TPU is regular, I guess it's shore hardness 95A. It's a Polymaker TPU. It's the regular one. It's somewhat stiff, but it's also squishy, especially when you're talking about bolt torque. So when I try to torque down these bolts as much as the factory bolts, there's no way. It's impossible. It'll just pull right through the TPU. So unless I put in the factory screws into the top plate and then somehow made something that doesn't use that mounting, like I don't even know how to do it. It breaks my brain trying to think. I'd have to put some other hardware that gets this TPU mount up above that layer and then, or like wraps around the top plate. I don't know. I'm not going to do that. So what I did is I actually prototyped this TPU mount in ASA. ASA is a lot stiffer than TPU. It is not as stiff as PLA. It is not as stiff as carbon fiber reinforced filaments. It's a hell of a lot stiffer than nylon, but it has impact resistance, which is what I want in case I crash, even though it'll probably just break off into a million pieces. Anyways, I'm going to change this TPU mount. If it is a problem with this wobble, this oscillation I'm getting, but maybe not, we'll check the analysis that I'm about to get into. I know I keep teasing that, but we're going to get there. Anyways, if this TPU mount was too soft, if it softened up the actual frame, because the flight controller is right back here. Hopefully you can see my mouse when I'm doing this. Now it'll be stiffer because I'm going to put a hard ASA mount. I was able to tighten up the bolts a lot more. The camera's not going to wobble around as much. I know some people get problems with their gyro on their flight controller because they have accessories flopping around off the back and the front of the frame, like VTX antennas that are just way too long, and that's feeding into the gyro, which eventually feeds into the PID loop. So anyways, that was my first theory about what might be causing this. But then I went back and analyzed my first black box log, which had the same wobbles. I thought it was me on the sticks. No, there's a frame resonance. And I was explaining a little earlier, and I think I found it, and I think I know how to tune it out. So let's jump into that because I'm getting way too in-depth on tiny little details. All right, so let's finally get into what I finally want to analyze here. This is actually a black box log from my first flight, but it had exactly the same problem. Unfortunately, I didn't clear my black box memory out on my flight controller, and it's really small because it's a budget drone. So I didn't get anything for this wobble fest on this flight with the Caddx Walnut installed. So I'm going from memory that the first flight was exactly the same. It had this weird wobbling issue that I really need to tune out if I want to get good video and be confident with this drone. Okay, so I have looked at black box logs for hours and hours and hours since I flew. I flew days ago. And I could analyze it on video for probably 30 minutes at least. But I think this is the most important one. So I'm recording my screen here, and I'll zoom in as necessary. I'm on gyro scaled, so the unfiltered gyro, and I'm on the pitch axis, which seems to have more problems with than the roll axis. So let me see if I can show you what's going on. So the roll and the pitch. Okay, so pitch. So I was watching this amazing video from Chris Rosser on Betaflight 4.5 filter tuning. And between his video and the PID Toolbox guy's video, they pointed out something to me that I finally saw in my logs. It's hard to make sense of all this noise. It's hard to analyze this stuff. So I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to make a million mistakes, and I'm not correct on maybe even half of it, but this is the process that I'm going through. So maybe that helps somebody out, especially somebody who has bought this drone, which there doesn't seem to be very many videos are on. Anyways, so this curve right here, which seems to have this familiar, nice little curve, that's supposed to be the first harmonic of my tri-blade props. And then there's a second strong harmonic down here. And I don't know what this is. It's almost like it's apparently the second harmonic shouldn't be visible. And then this should be the third harmonic. So I'm not sure what this is. I don't know if it's like a ghost. It's like a carbon copy of this line right here. That's okay. Those should be there. However, these vertical lines right here are indicative of a frame resonance, according to Chris Rosser and the PID Toolbox tuning guy. And there are filters turned on for this. You can see I have the filters listed. I have the D-term dynamic filter is between 75 and 150 hertz. And then there's a second one that has a cutoff of 150 hertz. Now, I've since learned that you probably actually want to lower that, so I'm going to show that picture here. So somebody sent this to me when I was talking to them about PID tuning or filter tuning, because I kind of want to look at the filtering before the PID tune. That's another theory, another rabbit hole that I'm going down. But notice how on 8-inch it says you should have your D-term filter cut off 75 to 100 hertz. So that might be my problem here. I don't think this filter's low enough, even though the box fits where those resonances are, and I believe that's frame resonance. The idea is that you want to be filtering below that because it's a slow roll on to the filter. So that noise still can be getting through, and there's a way to see that. I'm not going to do it right now, but if you turn on gyro after the filter, it's significantly reduced, but it's still there, and that might be what my issue is, and it may show up more in wind. But so my plan is, if I show this one screenshot of Betaflight, so my plan is to at first use the slider here. I'm going to lower the slider down, which means more filtering. And what that's supposed to do, it's supposed to take these values right here, and it's supposed to bring the frequencies down. This is not live Betaflight that I'm in. This is just a screenshot of my current settings. So I might lower the slider on the gyro filter, which equals more filtering again, and that should, in theory, I haven't tested it yet because it's a lot of work to hook up the drone, put a fan on it, and try all this shit out. So I may lower the gyro, but I think what I really want to focus on is the D term, based on all the research that I've done. That's what I want to try first, is just slowly going down on D term and trying to filter out that. And I want to get the maximum cutoff frequencies for these two values to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 hertz, because that's what seems to be recommended on people who are tuning bigger drones, like not just that other screenshot I showed you. But so let me go into what the factory has tried to do. So let me bring up the factory tune on VS Code here. I have my dump from my factory, which is, I left it the same. I made a bunch of changes when I went to Betaflight 4.5, but I'll show you what the only things they did to factory tune this. So they probably noticed that there was a resonance in that area. They're probably noticing what I'm going through right now. So what they did is they set a dynamic notch count to 1 and then lowered the Q. I'm not sure if that's a default setting or not, but they lowered the Q value to 400 instead of, I believe it's 500, which when you lower the Q, apparently you widen the notch to try to catch more of that noise. And that would make sense, especially if you're looking at, let's go back to the roll access. So there is a one band here, one clear band. And if the Betaflight default notch was too narrow, okay, factory widened it up to try to catch that. However, there's 2 on pitch, so I don't know if it's catching it because the Q would need to be twice as wide essentially, and you would need 2 instead of just 1. And then let me go back to the tune. It's only trying to catch it with 1. So that's half the factory tune. Well, for filters, the PID tune's a little bit different. I'll show that, but so here's the only other thing they did with filtering. So I believe Betaflight default is a PT1 curve. Let me show what that looks like in the GUI. So sorry, I'm getting real in the weeds here with a 1440p screen and screenshots and stuff. Anyways, you can see this filter type right here. It says PT2 and this is PT2. So it's essentially, from what I've researched, that's a stronger filter, meaning that they're trying to really catch things in the D term. I want to catch it more, and my theory is we need to get these frequencies down because these are default frequencies for a 4 or 5 inch or maybe even a 3 inch quad, and we're not flying a 3, 4, 5 inch quad. We're flying a 8-inch quad. The frequencies are just lower, and you can tell when I compare my black box logs with black box logs on YouTube videos from people flying smaller stuff, all my frequencies are pushed down. They're pushed down a lot more. So that would make sense. So that's what I'm going to try. And let me reset here in a second, and I will go to any other theories I have. Okay, so here is a screenshot of what it looks like if you're on the actual PID tab. I know I've been talking about filters a lot, but this is the PID tune for this is the factory PID tune for this quad. So at first I was like, well, this looks kind of weird. And I was like, well, no, it kind of makes sense. Although I don't fully understand what they were going for. And I'm not sure if this was in the right direction or not. Maybe they did this just to say that they did a factory tune on it, and it doesn't actually help the quad. Maybe it makes it worse. I'm going to leave it alone for now, but I wanted to say that on all my other quads, they fly perfectly fine on Betaflight defaults. I don't know why. I actually dumped the factory tune on my Mobula 8 because when I went to 4.5 and I applied the factory defaults, it flew so dang good. I was like, why would anybody even attempt to PID tune this thing? There is no reason to. I am not a good enough pilot. I had no oscillations on it, but now that I have oscillations, I'm like, okay, now I might need to go into PID tuning. And before that, I was having breakfast. I was like, before that, maybe I need to make sure that filtering is correct. I need to make sure that the data going into the PID loop is correct first before we even mess with the PID tuning at all. Now, the experts will say you should actually tune both at the same time. I will see as I get further in, because like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is lower the D-term slider. Okay, last thing I wanted to look at, PID Toolbox. Let me bring this up on my main screen here. So this is my log of a wobbly flight, and there's not much to see when you first open up the program, but you can go further into it. I just wanted to show this, that I just started analyzing it on this program and looked at it. I'm not sure what to think about this data. It's completely different data than the way Blackbox Log Viewer presents it. But anyways, you can see noise in here. It's not good. According to the PID Toolbox guy, the guy that makes this software, this is not very good data just right off the bat on this particular view, because you can do a lot. This is all MATLAB based. It's very awesome. But you can see on my pitch axis seems to have the most problem again. So you can see right here, there's a resonance at about like 110-ish, 105-ish hertz, and there's another one. He said that's normal, but you can actually tune that out. So that's expected. This isn't giving me much data. So let me go a little bit further in. I want to show, let's see if I have the step response. Yeah, so the step response, I don't like it. I've even corrected it for what he calls a DC offset, which is like audio terms, which is funny. But anyways, you can see it overshoots, and that's not good. There needs to be some different kind of tuning on there. And then if I go to, so that I don't want to get too into detail on that, but that's kind of obvious that the PID tune's not correct. So we'll fix that later on. Anyways, here is the frequency by throttle spectrograms. This is similar to the graph that I was showing in Blackbox Log Analyzer. And it does show problems. I'm not sure what to make of this because I'm not as familiar with this program again, so I just wanted to show you where my analysis was leading me. He likes to use this view also, frequency by time spectrogram, and he says, yeah, you're going to have some horizontal lines in there. I forget what the reason was. Anyways, I'm getting off in the weeds. All right, one more thing. I knew I was going to miss something. I was having a snack thinking, did I miss anything before I did my outro? Of course I did. I probably missed a million things, but this one's important. It has to do with this issue. So this is another reason why I think the factory noticed that there was this resonance or wobble for whatever reason. They put in Deadband. So if you look in the receiver tab, this is mostly the factory tune. Yeah, it's mostly the factory tune. So I left the deadband in there, figuring, hey, they know better than I do. So there's RC deadband and yaw deadband. Of the value is 5. I don't know how significant 5 is. I don't know what units those are. Is it 5 out of the 2,000, or 1,000 to 2,000 range? I don't know, but they put deadband in there. Why would they put deadband in there? There is a theory that I've heard. I mean, it's probably really good that they did this. There's a theory that I've heard that the bigger quads have so much leverage on the frame because the motors are so far out that any little bit of jitter on your radio link from your gimbals or wrong settings in your transmitters, say you've turned on the smoothing or turned off the smoothing, and you've got little micro steps like little jitter from your radio link. It's a good idea maybe to tune those out. Now, I haven't had to tune those out on any of my other quads, and I have a really powerful 4-inch that is insane, and it doesn't have any issues with that. But again, it's just a 4-inch and it's very light. It's like 150 grams. This quad weighs 1,000 grams plus now with the camera on it, and it's got a big wheelbase. So I guess there's some theory that all that leverage you got to take out. You might want some deadband, but it looks like the factory put some deadband in. Now they may have been trying to. Maybe they noticed that little wobble, and this was one of their attempts. Besides the other 2 little filter tunes that I showed you, and maybe part of the PID tune to try to get rid of that wobble. I don't know. Anyways, back to my original outro. So. That's it for now. It didn't fly good. The factory tune isn't good unless maybe you had a really light battery on it and there was no wind at all and you flew very smooth, which is possibly what you're supposed to do because it's a long-range drone. All those long-range guys are putting really big lithium-ion packs on it that I think weigh more than my pack. I have a GNB 3,000 milliamp hour high voltage pack. It's the purple one. Maybe I can show you a picture right now of what it looks like with the pack on. Here we go. Let me bring that up to my main screen. So that's what it looks like. That's the GNB pack that I put on there. 6S, 3,000 milliamp hour XT60 connector. I believe it's 120C regular and like 200C burst, which is BS. There's no way that's the rating. The GNB overrates their batteries, but it is a HV pack. I have not put up the high voltage, but that's besides the point. This is the Caddx Walnut on the front. This is with the ASA mount, but I have not flown it like that yet. I'm scared to fly it now that it's windy. It's going to be windy for like 20 days in a row. So I'm scared to fly it. If I tune it wrong and I crash it, I'm out some money, and I'm out the only HD camera I could afford. So I'm a little bit upset that it flew as bad as it did, but I'm going to tune it. Hopefully I can make more videos, especially on how I fixed it. And maybe it'll help somebody, and hopefully it'll help somebody that actually bought this drone. I've asked 2 people, let me know what yours flies like. It's not a very popular drone, so not many people bought this one. So anyways, that's going to be it for now. Thanks, guys.